Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to Semaphore Uncut, a podcast for developers about building great products.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Vaughn Vernon. Vaughn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Darko, for inviting me, and it's good to be with you.
Thanks. Can you just give us a brief introduction?
I started developing software professionally in 1983. I've seen a lot of changes. I've seen a lot of trends, and sort of what was being used back in 1983, which is called time sharing, is pretty much what the cloud is today. But of course, the cloud has a lot more options. One of the things that I was doing in the 1990s was developing software with Smalltalk. And I had previously used domain models with C and C++, but that was the tooling for doing that wasn't very good, because even though C++ was supposed to be object-oriented, it was kind of difficult to find the same kinds of thought around the programming environment. So Smalltalk provided a very good environment for the kinds of things that you would do, which later became known as domain-driven design. And that is, for one, just using a model, a software model. So designing and developing a software model. And of course, Smalltalk was based on either model view controller or what was then called view model, which was you actually cut out the controller, became part of the UI actually. So this led me to a lot of thinking around domain models, and it basically changed the way that I wrote software from then forward, right? I always wanted to think now about sending a message to an object rather than invoking a function or calling a function and things like that. So I just started thinking that way a lot. And a lot of the concepts that we were using in Smalltalk led to my sort of affinity for what became domain-driven design. We were using several of the patterns in domain-driven design before that existed. From there, I was introduced to domain-driven design, and I recognized this sort of similarity that I saw from Smalltalk and then continued with. And it just seemed sort of like this natural way to go. And it was amazing to me that there were people somewhere that thought the way I did, because I would constantly sort of run into a lot of resistance to this way of thinking because it wasn't being taught anywhere.
Thanks for getting that introduction and that overview. Since you are one of the best people to talk a bit about the history of domain-driven design and how it gained traction. I mean, my career started somewhat early 2000s, so that's where history begins for me. But if you could give your overview of how it gained traction, where is it today, and what would you like to see?
Probably Eric Evans' book is what I consider, yes, there it is. I consider it a classic. I consider it a masterpiece, but a lot of developers just, their eyes glaze over when they try to read it. I didn't always know exactly what Eric was trying to say in some places, or was saying, and I was trying to understand. But for the most part, I followed it. Jimmy Nielsen then had a book that was centered around sort of domain modeling. That attracted a lot of .NET developers because his book was using .NET, C#. And there was also sort of right around that same time that his book was released, this alt.NET. And this was basically kick out as much of the Microsoft tools as you possibly can, except for the language and a few things, right? And then try to bring open source in. And, so it was sort of this different way of thinking. And I think Jimmy's book sort of led to more interest on the .NET side. But there still wasn't much interest in the Java side of the world. I knew a few things that those who were trying to use DDD were stumbling over. And so I basically focused on wanting to teach those things in a book, and it worked out. You asked another question. What was?
Maybe based off your experience working with young people today, where is domain-driven design in the general computer science curriculums? And
it's basically zero. Even in a university here near my home, right? Their CS curriculum is C++. I don't think I would be teaching people how to use C++ right now. I would be teaching them how to use Java and C# and that's sort of like the low bar in my opinion, right? That's the low bar. Then why not some functional programming languages or something like that? Now, I think maybe you have to go to Oxford or some other university to get into that, where those professors who invented Haskell, for example, are, and then you can get into that. But we're just really not very advanced in university level software development topics. So computer science, I don't know. I'm not sure that computer science is really computer science anymore.
Well, universities are very, slow-moving institutions, to say, with adopting the rate of change and everything. I think that they're having a hard time following, because the rate of change is on one hand relatively fast. I don't know, TypeScript, which didn't existed until a couple of years ago. I'm now, every second person I meet is professionally developing TypeScript, and that seemed to be kind of the norm today. So from that perspective, I have empathy for the universities and their curriculums. On the other hand, there are timeless topics and practices such as domain-driven design, or generally test-driven development, those kind of practices that matter day to day, which could be incorporated, and it's not a rocket science on one side.
I misspoke when I said zero, because there actually are a few schools that I am aware of. One of the German applied sciences universities, I think it's near Dresden, and then there's another one in Switzerland.
There are probably more, but it's far from, I don't want to say mainstream, but yeah.
Yeah, it's true. I wish, though, that people would see those examples. In fact, on our site, kalele.io, KALELE.io, I have blog posts from, I think it's at least one of Frank Grimm's students who had just graduated, and he was already using DDD not only from school, but his internship after school and during school. He was using DDD on projects at advanced R&D companies. And he's written about that. One of them was automating the grocery shopping experience, not just at the cash register, but literally, as you put things in your cart at the grocery store, actually. And he couldn't even reveal some details because it's, trade secret. So that's very good for one college student or a few of them to go out into industry and be prepared for that and be able to actually lead.
I'm sure that you helped a lot of individuals and teams and companies, get better with DDD and the software developers. Can you maybe speak a bit on that topic? So let's say we are, 200 engineers company, and we reach out to you.
Well, first of all, if they want training, there's no way I can train 200 people all at the same time. We kind of limit our workshop to 25 or so, and that can even be a lot of people depending on the growth that's needed. And sometimes what you run into is, a very senior person, and the other side of the spectrum, a very junior person, and trying to cover that range in a workshop can be very challenging. Developers, when they learn about DDD, are generally very interested in it. They are attracted to the ideas. Still, the challenge is developers working closely with the business. It's just convincing people that this is really the way that you have to develop software. And Mel Conway said this back in 1967, right? Conway's law, that communication will reflect how the communication structure and the quality of communication will be reflected in your system design. DDD is built around communication, right? The ubiquitous language is there because of communication. So we are reflecting our team's communication and our innovative thoughts into software as a language.
Microservices architecture is all the rage these days. But do you know what it really means and how to implement it to empower your teams to make the best decision for the problem at hand? On the Semaphore blog, you can learn about microservices and how to take advantage of features like test reports, monorepo, and Docker support to build, test, and deploy your microservice application at scale. Head over to semaphoreCI.com/blog for more information. And happy reading!
There are a lot of teams that are embracing, due to some motivations and, for good or wrong reasons, microservices overall. What are your experiences here? If you take, domain-driven design, and as you said, you don't want to call a function, you want to send a message, going to microservices, more messages being sent. And we map that also to the communication overall between teams, individual, and microservices, how that all fits together based on your past experience in the industry.
before you even think about monolith or microservice, either one, right? Think about modularity. And right away, your mind might think, well, a microservice is a module, right? Yeah, but I mean, maybe that's true, but then what's in that module, right? And so there's this sort of very, very far, whatever we want to call it, pendulum swing toward tiny, tiny microservices. And every module is like one entity or one process step that's going to do something and then pass along a message, an event, let's say, versus the monolith where nobody can even see which objects are related to each other because there are no modules there, or the modules are not very valuable there, right? They're not really a guideline for anything. And what happens is, regardless of the modules, they're probably misnamed and not consistent, that there's still this object tangle, right? Everything depends on everything else. Obviously not everything, but that's what it looks like. So this is where the big ball of mud comes in. So monolith is not a bad word and it's not a bad idea. It's when that thing happens, the big ball of mud happens, right? Where there is broken communication, all this communication for different parts of the business go into this one area, and they're all tangled together. Then you go to the other side and you have these tiny, tiny microservices, and that actually can become a distributed big ball of mud because still there's a lot of coupling between that when it's meant to not to break coupling, right? Or to at least relax the coupling greatly. So something that's extremely important is that modularity, first of all, but think in terms of if I were to modularize a specific conversation or a specific set of conversations with the business, where would I put those conversations? What module would I put them in? And that's typically a bounded context for DDD. That is sort of like this middle ground, probably more toward the small end than the large end, the monolith end. But now you can put multiple of those smallish modules into a monolith. So you can have 10 bounded contexts in a monolith, but they're separated by modularity and the business aspects. Like you might even think of it as a business capability or a fine-grained business capability that's in this module. You can pack 10, 20, whatever. Not that you would do that, but they're separated, right? So now you can actually make sense of this monolith and it's no longer a big ball of mud. To the other extreme, though, pull some of those dozens of different entity types and processors or whatever into a bounded context, a single module, and release microservices at that module level that I just described before, where conversations fit like a finer grained business capability, and deploy that as a microservice. Now you've probably just reduced your total microservices from hundreds to maybe a dozen or so. Now, right, we can wrap our heads around that. Even 30 can be difficult to think about, but carving down something from 1,000 or more or hundreds or more down to a dozen or dozens, just your brain says, oh, we can deal with this. And if I don't know the answer to one of those dozen or dozens of areas, I'll just go to someone else because I know who that team is. So if you want to put those into a monolith, fine. If you want them to be microservices, or maybe it's a split. Maybe you don't, maybe the things that go into the monolith don't change that often, but the things that you decide to use as microservices change more often. And we just need to not have that clash or pain between teams saying, okay, we got to release today, right now. And no, we can't because the monolith is, like not ready for that right now.
Some people having hundreds or, even thousands of microservices, and then you were mentioning, a dozen, couple of dozen, 30. So, what kind of rings in my head is a human scale. So can I even remember okay, we have 30 or tops 50 microservices. I can maybe know them by name or majority, but after it gets way out of hand on the human scale, well, then it's very, very hard to manage.
Maybe the ones that you remember the names of and why you remember it is because they're the most important ones. And the ones that you start forgetting, maybe all of those should be in a monolith because you can't remember them because we never talk about that. It just works, right?
People have 10-year-old application, monolith, not monolith, doesn't matter. And they have a test suite, takes 1 hour to run, let's say. That's a good scenario. And then statistic is just saying that there are a couple of hundreds of tests that haven't failed in over 2 years. So that's an area where what we found interesting. So what is that saying? Are those tests maybe just always green? Maybe they're not testing anything. Maybe whatever you do with your software, they will still be green. What's the value in them?
Or maybe it just works, right? Or maybe it just works and it's not changing a lot.
Exactly. It's just not changing a lot. And then there's that big question of, is it worth running all of those tests, those many hundreds of times per day, wasting electricity and time and money, because those pieces of your software are just not changing. But it's, on the other hand, people are changing, teams are changing. It's who is going to say, let's run this portion of tests because those haven't failed in the last 12 months. Just something connecting to what you were saying about what might just well go in the monolith.
I have had conversations and consulted with very, very successful cloud companies. I'm not talking about cloud platform, I'm talking about the business is in the cloud, right? Any of these companies that have been successful started out by bootstrapping and getting just enough code running to go into business, right? And then this customer starts asking for this and this customer starts asking for that. And then at first it's a few customers and then it's dozens and then it's hundreds of customers. And you just keep pushing everything into this code base. And if teams, startup founders, whoever just would stop for a few minutes and say, okay, we can predict that if we stay in business, this is going to happen. Shouldn't we start thinking about the modules that each of these things fit into? Where do they belong and how do they talk to each other? It can still be in a monolith, but just put them into different modules. Now, later, if you want to break out a microservice from that, I'm not saying it's just good. If you have that vision of we will need to break out microservices later, you'll have that on your mind. I'm not saying that these companies would absolutely just say, okay, let's take this bigger module and just take it out and put it into a microservice. That's probably not going to work like that because there are probably still connections and so forth, but it's going to be way, way simpler to deal with than that tangle that you know about that I just described and so forth, right? That's the idea. So if you're working in a startup, just have that conversation. It may take a day to figure out where are our boundaries. And if we needed to break these out into microservices later, which ones will we want to do that with? And then remain in the monolith, right? Because actually you're cutting down on a lot of technical overhead of, what if the network fails? Now you just have to worry about, can one of these things survive a network failure, right? One of these monoliths, or we start to scale it. We have 3 of them running in different places. Can those survive network failure? Instead of saying, okay, let's try to figure out what network failure would do to these 100 microservices, right?
For people that want to learn more about your company, your books, your future work, can you give us some points, tips?
Yeah, sure. So our boutique services and product development company is called Kalele, and we have a .io top-level domain for that. And so you'll find a lot of my work there, my workshops. I'll be teaching a workshop early December on the Implementing Domain-Driven Design workshop, which is our sort of flagship workshop that I've taught thousands of developers. And that's a virtual workshop, so everybody can jump in there pretty easily. You'll find my books on informit.com, informit, if you will, .com, and Amazon and any other online booksellers. Typically, people run to Amazon. And so you could search for my name or search for strategic monoliths and microservices. And we have a product called Domo. It's currently at domorobo.to. So Domo Roboto, right? It's like this Japanese play on words. But we're calling the product Domo, and it is for event storming, live event storming, domain modeling, using domain-driven design bounded context maps, and we even support mind maps, impact maps, and specification by example or BDD, and user stories. So, follow me on Twitter. I do sometimes tweet about sports. So So be aware, but overwhelmingly, I'm tweeting about architecture and software architecture and domain-driven design. So it's at Vaughn Vernon, my name.
Great. Thank you so much. It was great talking to you and, hearing all your experiences from your long career. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you, Darko. And I wish you all success with your CI product too.
What a great conversation. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. Make sure to subscribe to Semaphore Uncut on your podcast player of choice so that you don't miss our new episodes. And stay tuned.